This is Think Out Loud on OPB. I'm Dave Miller. The number of people experiencing homelessness in Central Oregon dropped nearly 20% this year. That's according to data from the region's annual point-in-time count, which was just released. It includes Deschutes, Crook, and Jefferson Counties, as well as the Confederated tribes of Warm Springs. Eliza Wilson is the chair of the Homeless Leadership Coalition in Central Oregon and the executive director of Rooted Homes. That's an affordable housing developer based in Bend. She joins us now with more details. It's great to have you on Think Out Loud.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
It's been a little while since we've talked about point-in-time counts. Can you just remind us where's the basics first of how they're done?
Yeah, absolutely. HUD, which is a federal agency, requires that every community across the country conduct a point-in-time count yearly in the wintertime. Imagine that. And communities really get to kind of design how that looks in their communities. The basis of it is to count everyone experiencing homelessness in the community and provide that data to HUD so that they can provide it to Congress and make decisions about allocations every year. And so in Central Oregon, we really emphasize working with each community. We're a broad region. It's 15,000 square miles, largely rural. We work with every community and develop leads that really do the point-in-time count a little differently in each community based on their needs.
This is really a snapshot, as the name implies, a point-in-time snapshot. How much can we trust? I mean, what kinds of conclusions can we draw from these counts, whether numbers are stable or go way up, or in your case this year, go way down?
Yeah, I think, that really depends on the community and the efforts that go into the point-in-time count. In Central Oregon, we're really fortunate to have all of our providers that work with folks experiencing homelessness, even our medical providers, conduct the count every year. We work with our McKinney-Vento liaisons. They're the folks that work with unhoused students and families in the school district, and they also conduct the point-in-time count. And so the counties and their mental health departments. So we have a very robust point-in-time count. We've worked for years to develop that. We also count for a week. Some folks just do mostly observational counts, driving around, not really surveying folks. We do a full survey with folks, and it's the people that work with them every day, their medical provider, their street outreach provider that's working with them every day, or the folks that are sheltering them that do the count. But it is important to look at it as a point in time and just kind of a snapshot of that period of time. We know that, folks are more accessible during the summer. We would likely get more surveys during that time, but it is important to compare it to other data points that we have. So, for example, we know it's particularly difficult to count young people experiencing homelessness and children in families. And so we also compare it or provide information to our community about the McKinney-Vento liaison list. They have the number of students that experience homelessness throughout the year. And then we also have a local all of our providers locally enter data into a data system, just like it happens all over the country. And so we are developing a dashboard so that we can provide more real-time data to folks.
In the big picture, how do you make sense of this nearly 20% decrease?
Yeah, we're really fortunate in Central Oregon. These last couple of years, we have a governor who, her first day in office, declared a state of emergency on homelessness. Oregon has really been under-resourced for federal funds, and Central Oregon has been underdeveloped for housing and state and federal funds. And so her first day in office, like I said, she declared a state of emergency. Funds were deployed to regions, part of the states that, part of Oregon that have the most folks experiencing homelessness. And Central Oregon was one of those communities. We really believe that the drop in numbers has contributed to the fact of us, for the first time, getting dollars to provide housing-focused case management, as well as expanding shelter beds to stabilize folks and to house folks. We housed more people in 2025 than any other year before, just because we had the access to resources. we really believe that people want to be housed. It's just the access to getting housed that's missing a lot
You
of times.
mentioned shelters there, but just to be clear, we're not talking here in that 20% drop about a shift in the experience of homelessness, right? From, say,
Right.
living in a tent in a national forest to living in a shelter. This is truly a shift from some kind of
Yes.
homelessness to housing.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make, because last year, so in the 2025 point in time count, we actually saw, because of the increase in shelter beds, more people were in shelter than ever before because we actually had the beds available. This year, we believe, folks were able to stabilize, they were able to access housing services because, in 2025 we had more housing services. But yes, that drop is not folks going from unsheltered homelessness to shelter. It's folks going into housing.
Well, this and do I understand you correctly that you're saying that you're actually, because for years there has been sometimes it's been called the debate. It's more like a question of the best allocation of scarce resources about,
Right.
housing versus shelter. And I've heard from plenty of experts saying, don't call this, that we need everything. Don't pit them
Yeah.
against each other. But one of the theories has been, or the hopes has been, that shelters can lead to housing. And it seems like you're saying that in Central Oregon, that is the case.
Yes. And the reason we can say that, especially the shelters that have more funds to provide case management, robust case management to folks. So we do track data every time somebody accesses shelter, every time somebody receives case management or other types of resources when they're living outside. And so we have that data accessible to us. And when we're looking at data, we can look at program by program the exits to permanent housing. And so when you see in our community, and I'm sure this is pretty common across the country, when you see that robust housing focused case management is paired with, housing access, so there's a place for somebody to go, whether that's paid for by the continuum, like us, or whether that's, someone just needed a security deposit. Some folks have less need. It's not a one size fits all approach. But when you see those things paired together, we have more outcomes of permanent housing. And in Central Oregon, we just didn't have the resources to send people to. And so for the first time, we have had those, and it's been highly successful.
If you're just tuning in, I'm talking right now with Eliza Wilson. We're talking about some rare good news in terms of homelessness in Oregon. The most recent Central Oregon point-in-time count found a nearly 20% drop in people experiencing homelessness. This is in Deschutes, Crook, and Jefferson counties, as well as the Confederated tribes of Warm Springs. One of the things about this count is it's not just a top level, this is the number of people experiencing homelessness. There are other questions and some details about demographics. What stands out to you broadly in the demographics this year?
Yeah, we opted in as a community several years ago to start asking folks. This is not a required question. It's not one that the federal government asks us to ask folks, but we opted in to ask them how long they've been in Central Oregon. Like many communities around the country, are sometimes folks believe the myth that we only have people experiencing homelessness because they're moving in from other areas because we have resources available. Service providers know that's not true, but we understand that the public is naturally a little skeptical about stuff. And so we started asking several years ago how long they've been in Central Oregon. And so in this year's count, we saw that over 50% have been here for 10 years or longer. And the vast majority have been in Central Oregon for a year or longer. Also, the number of, unaccompanied youth, youth that are 18 to 24, and families. Just looking at those demographics, as well as was pretty astounding is like the number of folks who are 55 plus experiencing homelessness in our community. We know, just based on the state in shelters here, that there are folks aging in to chronicity, to being chronically homeless, that are elderly and need a lot of medical support. And we're seeing that in the shelters, that more and more folks are coming in. End of life care is needed. Oftentimes, like, significant support is needed that we just can't provide. And so we see that in the count this year as well.
So, I mean, you're getting this a little bit, but there was good news overall. But what do you see as the biggest areas of concern?
I'm a person with lived experience of youth homelessness, and anytime we see a count that has children and youth, in high rates experiencing homelessness, and we know in 2022, Central Oregon had the highest rates of unsheltered youth and family homelessness in the country. We were cited in a report to Congress as being one of the 4 top COCs in the country for those 2 demographics, which is not a good thing to have, by the way. It's not, when you're listed as the top 4, it's not always a good thing, we learned. And so we've done significant, we significantly prioritize those folks when we're building shelter, accessing housing. But we still see families and youth experiencing homelessness in our count. And so that's, we would love to get that to 0, as well as the elderly folks, like I mentioned. And we have I think it was 22% of folks were chronically homeless. And we believe those are folks that are, again, aging into chronic homelessness. They've just not had access to resources for a long period of time. And so they're becoming chronically homeless just because of length of time before they get resources.
I want to follow up on what you just said, that you experienced homelessness yourself as a young person with your family when you were growing up in Central Oregon. How does that affect the way that you approach your work today?
I think I bring a lot of empathy to my work, and oftentimes more emotion than other people. I just think that when we have these folks, just seeing folks outside and not knowing we don't have enough resources to provide them, it really just, puts a fire in me to do more. And as a community, to continue to ask for more collaboration, more services, more support. But also, I think it really emphasizes for me the need for folks with lived experience or who are currently experiencing homelessness, because everybody has a different experience. And mine, thankfully, was years ago.
How much has changed? So sorry, but I'm curious about, as you're saying, yours was years ago.
Yeah.
Well, what has changed for homeless families from when you were experiencing that with your family as a kid and kids and families today?
Yeah, when I was experiencing homelessness as a kid, there were no shelters in Central Oregon for families. There was, they're still in existence. There were 2 youth shelters, and thankfully I ended up, accessing youth shelter at 16 and lived there for 3 years, graduated high school. And then, I went on to live in the maternity group home because I was a pregnant teen. But at the time, there were no shelters for families. And so my family was sleeping like a lot of families do in Central Oregon that don't have access to shelter because they're full. The family shelters are full. We were sleeping, in campgrounds, in a trailer in the Walmart parking lot. So I think what's changed is that there's actually some resources to point families to. And then just access to information. I think that people have greater access to information online. Back then we didn't have the cell phones, and people had cell phones. I'm not that, I'm trying not to age myself too much, but people had cell phones. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have access to know what the resources were. So I think
it seems like your choice when you were 16 was be unsheltered with your family or be by yourself in a shelter.
Yeah. And I think I even had fewer, before that, I experienced homelessness on my own because I wanted to stay in school. I had this goal. I really wanted to attend high school and finish high school. Previous to that, only my mom had graduated high school. Many of my other family members had not. And that was a big goal for me. So I ended up actually camping out near my high school so that I could make it to school. And my counselor knew about that, and he referred me to the youth shelter.
To go back to one of the details from the point in time count that stood out to me, it says that 2/3 of respondents have experienced homelessness for a year or longer. If I understood that correctly, I immediately, my mind went to the other third. And I took that to mean that 1/3 of people in this year's count were newly homeless just in the last year. What are you doing in Central Oregon to prevent people right now from becoming homeless in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to look at in communities. It's really unfortunate in Oregon. We have had some budget cuts, and I can say that we are doing less than we did last year, because we previously had some access to some prevention dollars around evictions, and we don't have that anymore. So we do expect that the inflow to increase as long as the legislator doesn't allocate money to prevention. We had a really robust system before to kind of prevent folks. And so it's true, we were able to prevent a lot of the inflow. And I think that's a good point in looking at the system overall. A lot of people just look at the point in time count data, but people go into homelessness every day in communities, and then folks leave, right? So it's the inflow and outflow, and understanding how that happens and how we can step in. And so prevention is a big one, with the eviction prevention.
And just briefly, I mentioned at the beginning that you work for an affordable housing nonprofit. How many new affordable housing units have actually been coming online in Bend or in Central Oregon more broadly?
Central Oregon is number one. This is a good thing that we're number one in. We're number one in housing development in the state. We, like I said, have been under-resourced for housing development, and we've been very proactive. The local jurisdictions, and then providers like Rooted Homes, Habitat, Thistle and Nest, and others like our local housing authority have been building as much as we can get funding for. And so a lot of units have come online. That also, contributes to the count and folks being able to be stably housed. And so that is something that's a huge initiative locally to continue to build and figure out new innovative ways to bring housing on the market.
Eliza Wilson, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Eliza Wilson is the chair of the Homeless Leadership Coalition in Central Oregon and the executive director of Rooted Homes. That's an affordable housing developer based in Bend. Our production staff includes Malia Fass, Rolly Hernandez, Gemma DiCarlo, senior producer Allison Frost, and managing producer Shiraz Sadiq. Nalene Silva and Layla Isbell engineer the show from the Gert Boyle studio. Our technical director is Stephen Cray, and our executive producer is Sage Van Wing. If you don't want to miss any of our shows, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, there is our nightly radio rebroadcast at 8 p.m. Thanks very much for tuning in to Think Out Loud on OPB and KLCC. I'm Dave Miller. Have a great weekend.
Think Out Loud is supported by Steve and Jan Oliva, the Rose E. Tucker Charitable Trust, Michael, Kristen, Andrew Kern, and Anna Sanford, and the Jackson Foundation.